When I saw the words crazy talk, stupid talk, Sinclair Lewis's novel, The Man Who Knew Coolidge, subtitled Being the Soul of Lowell Schmaltz, Constructive and Nordic Citizen, immediately came to mind. Lewis is my favorite author, and this underrated, I feel, novel, published in 1928, really is an extended dramatic monologue. For the main character, Lowell Schmaltz, reveals himself in 6 monologues. The Man Who Knew Coolidge, the story of Mac, You Know How Women Are, You Know How Relatives Are, Travel is So Broadening, and the basic and fundamental ideals of Christian American citizenship. In these monologues, Schmaltz, jumping from one subject to another, discusses various aspects of American society: travel, drinking, politics, religion, etc. He, however, emerges as a narrow-minded, long-winded bore. In fact, Lewis establishes the dominant irony in the novel's opening statement when Schmaltz says, quote, "And I certainly do enjoy listening to you gentlemen and getting your views," quote. For Schmaltz clearly indicates, as the novel progresses, that he enjoys listening to no one but himself, and the only views he enjoys are his own. The title and subtitle Lewis uses ironically, for though Schmaltz says he knew Coolidge when he was in college, he lies. In fact, he is so involved in his own rhetoric that he seemingly cannot remember from one minute to the next what he has said. He admits later in the novel, quote, "I didn't know President Coolidge in college," quote. The subtitle also is ironic because, as D.J. Dooley says in The Art of Sinclair Lewis, Lowell Schmaltz hasn't got a soul, at least not a rational soul. He proves himself to be hypocritical, narrow-minded, immoral, foolish, and silly. Neither is he constructive, that is, useful and helpful. Schmaltz, blind to his own faults, does not even perceive how ridiculous some people might think his own name sounds. Yet he comments on, quotation marks, funny names, quotes, such as Swanson, Kettleson, and Shipstead, none of which probably sound as idiotic as Schmaltz. In the For What It's Worth department, Schmaltz is a Yiddish term that means rendered, that is, clarified chicken fat. Another definition is excessive sentimentality. He says a lot of people think Schmaltz is German. No. He says, he clarifies, it's Pennsylvania Dutch, which is almost the same thing as saying New England Yankee, a typical example of Schmaltz's reasoning. Schmaltz seemingly loves his appropriate nickname, Low, which is indeed fitting, for especially when it comes to language usage, Schmaltz occupies a low rung, probably the lowest, on the hierarchy of grammar and usage. He's also low in other areas of his life, but our focal point will be on language. And surely Lewis has great fun with the name Mac. In the back of my mind, I have the idea that at one time people, mainly males, used the name Mac with males they didn't know. For example, a man needing directions might ask a parking lot attendant, "Hey Mac, can you tell me how to get to such and such place?" Therefore, I believe Lewis is satirizing the overuse of Mac by overusing the name himself in the character's name here. Lewis has great fun with language. That is crazy talk, stupid talk. Does this throughout the novel. And again, I feel this novel really grossly underrated. One of my favorite examples involves, I believe, a satire on etymology. Interested in food and never at a loss for words, Schmaltz gives a ridiculous history of the word wiener. When he says, "Did you ever know that weenies are named after," and Schmaltz would say Wien, of course would be Wien, a German city. Using the internet, I found a list of German cities. Yes, there was a Wiener, spelled, Weener, but alas, no Wien, unless I overlook something. In essence, Schmaltz does not realize how badly he uses language, though early in the novel he says, quotes, "It's nice language and nice manners that enable a fellow to get along in this world." Quote. He also says, "The way that kid and sister," referring to his son and daughter, "torture the English language to death just about gets my goat." He even says him and his sister was talking one time, and he starts kidding her about some bird she was sweet on, and he says, "That guy's all wet." This brief passage obviously contains language issues that will be addressed later in this paper. Grammatical mistakes, cliches, slang. The irony of ironies is that Schmaltz does not realize how badly he tortures the language. At times, Schmaltz confuses words. For example, he says, quotes, "Someday I'm going to put a radio in my bathroom." But that's an ideal to be worked out in the future. Surely the intended word is idea, though yes, I've heard people say ideal for idea. He says dark complected, though I will have to give him the benefit of the doubt. I was taught complexioned. Nonetheless, my dictionary, and this was a surprise, says regarding complected, quoting from the dictionary, "Not an era, not a dialectal term, not substandard, all of which it has been labeled." But again, according to the dictionary, complected still manages to raise hackles, tempers. And probably my favorite example, again, what Lowell says, the great marzipan, not no Mazeppa, because marzipan is one of my favorite candies. But who knows what Schmaltz had in mind when he confused these words, again, marzipan, Mazeppa, though I do not think he was considering Lord Byron's poem Mazeppa. Schmaltz also mispronounces words. For example, he says genuine for genuine, and if I can get this out, Jugoslovakia for Yugoslavia. He at times resorts to euphemisms. His son Robbie did not fail classes, correct term, in all likelihood the situation, but, quotation marks, had to sort of make up some extra courses this last semester, quotation marks. He even resorts to euphemisms used with death and dying, loved ones, deceased, and casket. I tell my students in my writing and editing classes to avoid euphemisms like the plague, one of my favorite cliches, and he is not beyond illiterate usage when he says, for them days. Worse, and again indicating the appropriateness of the nickname Low, Schmaltz uses derogatory slang racial names. He talks about fellows with womp names and hunky Hungarian names. He refers to African American orchestra members at a speakeasy as coons, and he uses the labels Chinks and Norski. Norski, I learned, I guessed, a Norwegian for other nationalities. A Jew is a kike, and speaking of a Jewish shoe salesman, Schmaltz says, I Jewed him down. Yes, Schmaltz murders or tortures the English language. His mistakes are so numerous, it would be impossible to include every one of them in a paper of this nature. So, as I reread The Man Who Knew Coolidge, I categorized eras. Examples follow. First category, double negatives and worse. They couldn't get no other way. Here comes, oh, this is a gem. They didn't know nothing about no lost dog, triple negative. I remember when I took Old English Anglo-Saxon, the more negatives you had back then, the more emphatic your statement. Didn't want to get into no complications. Couldn't hardly. Pronoun eras. Cal, Calvin Coolidge, and me happened to come out of a class together. I've heard some mighty queer rumors about the way him and his lady secretary carry on. It was her. Failure to use the subjunctive mood. It, a speakeasy, talking about a speakeasy, was fixed up as elegant as if it were, rather if it was, the Vanderbilt's ballroom. If I was running a big hotel. She wishes I was a doctor. If I was younger. Adjectives instead of adverbs. We don't live so bad. Jones was real nice to her. I couldn't sleep very good. And I could go on and on and on. He don't, all sorts of problems with verbs. He is forever using cliches. And I do have something of a disclaimer. Obviously, I was not alive in 1928, so I assume expressions considered cliches today perhaps already were tried in Schmaltz's day. Oh, again, there are so many to list. What I did, I divided cliches into regular cliches and simile cliches. Regular, confession is good for the soul. On God's green earth, down in the mouth. Oh, goodness. Smart as a whip, could go on and on and on. Oh, goodness. The list, once more, is endless. So let me bring this to a close. Though Schmaltz considers himself a modern, up-to-date liberal man, I believe that's what he calls himself, he proves himself to be hopelessly narrow-minded and conservative. And I found a lot of semantic errors, allness. It is just really a rich source of just about any error you could think of. So in conclusion, indeed, Lowell Schmaltz is a master of crazy talk, stupid talk. He rambles from one topic to another, never realizing his listeners might be bored. Ironically, it is he, correct use of pronoun there, who is the complete bore. Thank you.
Thank you.